Recruiters and HR, what red flags do you find in a resume which means the interviewee is not what they seem? A 9-page long resume for someone who has 3 years of work experience. I once read one of someone who claimed to have a psychology degree from the university I had attended. Since it was several states away, this stuck out. Since he didn't know how to spell psychology, I obviously knew he was lying, but it was open panel interviews, so I spoke with him face to face anyway. The look of shock and terror in his eyes when I said I was thrilled to see that we were alums from the same place and started discussing details of campus was kind of fun to witness. 5 years worth of graphic design experience, but no portfolio because of a crashed hard drive. This was before cloud backups were much a thing. Rest of the story, I rolled the dice. Gave them a chance because all of the other applicants were terrible. And they were one of my best hires. Dude put on his resume CCNA-1 under certifications. The CCNA is a Cisco network certification. During the interview I asked what the -1 meant. He said, "Oh, I missed the certification by only one question." I asked how we could verify that. He sort of shrugged. Not in HR. But when I ran a small office years ago, I received a resume from a young woman who bragged she was a member of Mensa, had been a research associate at a prestigious university, etc. She also mentioned 3 times she was not a Republican. I thought, well, cool. But I don't think that really has anything to do with the job. It took me about a day to figure out she was trying to say she was a notary public, which threw the whole Mensa thing into doubt. I was following up with references one time on 3 different employees. We are seasonal, so we do a big hire all at once. Employee 1. The first person I called was extremely confrontational and asked why I was calling her of all people. I explained she was listed as a reference in dead silence. Then I went to high school with her 30 years ago. Barely knew her then and haven't talked to her since. Employee number 2. Reference said to me she listed me as her boss. I met her once in passing. We worked in the same building but different departments with completely different management. I've never worked with this person, nor could I tell you her job title. Employee 3. Ugh, what did my daughter do this time? When I asked if I was speaking with, insert name, so she listed her mom as a reference. I asked if her daughter had ever worked for her, as it was listed she was her last boss, and she laughed and said no. All 3 of those were automatic no's. Just last month I was hiring a receptionist team lead for a clinic, and one of our candidates spent a good quarter of a page telling us about his boxing career. I had a resume once where a guy had obviously just copy and pasted job descriptions as his work history. It was blatantly obvious because everything was in third person. Guy didn't even take the time to edit it. Candidate will be able to type wording. I gave him an interview and asked him tough questions based off of his supposed work experience. I was morbidly curious if he was just bad at writing resumes or just a lazy liar. Turns out he was the latter. When I interview someone I usually try and ease up on questions when it's obvious the candidate doesn't have the required experience. I don't want someone leaving totally demoralized, etc. I didn't let up on this guy though, and when he couldn't answer a question I would comment that he had it listed in his resume. Hopefully he learned a lesson. There was a period where people would attach a photo of themselves on or with their resume. I had a young girl about 18-19 attach a photo to her resume. The issue was that the photo was of her in a bikini on her knees at the water's edge with her hands behind her head, sticking her chest out. She was smoking hot but did not quite make the short list. She may have gotten the job if we had an eye for tail and not detail. She should have checked what she was sending. A lot of people put projects on their CV that they have never built. I get this from recent college grads all the time. Architected an Oracle database from scratch for a student records processing application. Wrote all of the SQL to access and update the data. What's the difference between a left join and inner join? Well, that would depend on the context of the application. No, it doesn't. before word processing software and online applications. My two biggest red flags was not being able to spell the name of the school they claimed to have graduated from and the name of the street they lived on. The recruiting team at my company tossed away a CV from a guy because he had Domino's pizza delivery driver on it as his current role. When I'm hiring for my team, I make it a point to look at bin CVs just to check I'm not missing a diamond in the rough. When I looked at this guy's credentials, it turned out that he was driving for Domino's while completing his master's degree and had technical qualifications up to his eyeballs. I hired him after bringing him in for interviews and he's now my right-hand man. Another guy I interviewed had a perfect CV but refused to shake my hand or make eye contact throughout the interview. That was a big nope. Another started ranting about his current company and how shitty they are. Another nope. Hiring people is exhausting. Too many jobs in too short period of time was always a red flag. But lately, with all that's gone on, I've had 3 different jobs in a year when my original career was decimated by the pandemic. So I have a changed perspective now. Edit. Red flag doesn't mean they're out or have no chance. It means I will dig deeper. Could be circumstances or it could be you. Depends on your qualifications and skills, not experience, that dictate my actions. Edit 2. Thank you all for the great discussions and stories surrounding this. Trying to read them all and respond. Also, I was a hiring manager, so I saw things a little different than a recruiter or HR person. I had to put the right piece in place to make my team atmosphere a non-toxic environment. Too many jobs in a short period of time with no mitigating factors. Skills. Tactical use of a Segway. Experience in defending large malls from terrorists. Clearly he is downplaying his skills. Somebody of that caliber is overqualified. Not doing any hiring recruiting now. But when I did, a big red flag was when someone had a string of brief jobs. Especially if they were all in the same field. If someone was young and worked 6 months at Big Hamburger and 6 months at Amusement Park X before entering the field, no big deal. If someone over 25 had a resume with every other mental health provider in the area and didn't make it any of those agencies, it was an indicator that they wouldn't be a good fit for us either. Someone claimed to be a member of the New York State Bar, admission pending, which I thought meant that he had already passed the NY bar, but just needed to submit the doc requirements and take the oath. During the interview, I asked when he could start and he said right after he takes the NY bar exam later that week. Then he could start right after. Okay. And I'm a PhD candidate too. Just wait and let me submit my application. You forgot the serious tag, mate. Stroke. In a resume. Red flags I've seen maybe. Overly charged resume with meaningless information. Focus on what you know is relevant for the job. If it's not directly relevant but you want it mentioned, keep it short and to the point. I don't care about your GCSE grades or the entire curriculum of your courses. Just tell me what you learned that is gonna help you do the job correctly. I need to see why you fit a position advertised, not that you've done 1,000 irrelevant feats. A resume with a very high number of typos and spelling mistakes. A couple of errors here and there. I can understand, but if you clearly didn't make an effort to triple check your resume, or if you have issues or trouble in this area, didn't take the time to ask someone to help you with it, it tells a lot about the kind of work I can expect from you. Not currently either of the two, but a friend of mine had a paragraph about his WoW gaming and his levels. He didn't get a job until he removed it. I was HR hiring for a restaurant and one of the Polish applicants had steroid and bodybuilding supplement supplier as his self-employment. For me, it's when someone who's young with lots of wordy descriptions for basic jobs. Senior executive in charge of caffeine distribution isn't a title. You got coffee. Embrace that. It's fine. If you were the best coffee runner, fine. Glorifying basic crap in a resume makes you come across as a liar. When they ask how strict our sexual harassment policies are, maybe they had been sexually harassed at a previous workplace? would never hire anyone that puts a space before a question mark. The resume is what gets you the interview. So if you're physically there, it means your resume is good. Now if you don't know why you're there, that is, you can't answer basic questions about the job you've applied for, or you just seem like a different person, it means that a, someone else wrote your application, and b, you haven't prepared either or both. Or I've done a bad job and haven't caught on that you were obviously lying in your application. This thread is depressing because it's making me realize just how nitty-gritty these details matter. But also how they really don't, because so much of this is up to the HR person's personal feelings about it. Also, overqualified is a measure of how long they think you will stay before leaving for a better position. The cost-benefit analysis of hiring and training you versus how long you produce actual value for the company before you deem your place too underpaid to be worth your time. I once saw a retail CV where the person said they had great attention to detail and then immediately followed that by saying they had extensive experience working with costumers. I find that in the age of Indeed and other job applicant advertisement websites, the ease of fielding more job opportunities by posting one's resume and having related jobs recommended by the algorithm is tempered by the employer feeling empowered to require minimum 5 years experience for an entry-level position. While this is not exactly what we are talking about here, in my opinion it creates a dynamic of BS. The employer is obviously taking advantage of a job market, and for the applicant to respond with courtesy and acceptance of blatant unfairness should actually be the red flag. When they don't even show up for the interview. I know that's not exactly what OP is asking. But when I was hiring, the HR department would qualify candidates and set up interviews. I'd confirm the day before. And still, about 50% of people would just not show up. Or they'd come up with some stupid excuse. So, I'd give them a second chance and ask to reschedule. And then they'd never get back to me. My co-workers told me it was because they were most likely on unemployment and had to apply to jobs to keep their benefits, but didn't want to actually work. Years ago, recruiters would be given a certain number of adverts that had to be used. Got so fed up of developers saying they had experience in a language, then when shortlisted and tested they didn't have a clue. One lad would always lose his shit about this and decided to invent a language called BXIPRO 4.2 and included it in his advert, saying that applicants needed at least 12-month experience if BXIPRO 4.2. We got CVs with BXIPRO experience noted in skillsets. Describing job duties experiences differently than the resume. Egg. Resume says you were a manager of a store, but you recite a story about being a cashier, not being able to give any real-life examples, and just use hypotheticals. Egg. Tell us about a time you dealt with an angry customer and the answering being something vague and generic. Gaps between jobs can be a red flag in general, but sometimes that can be missed during a screening process. Except a lot of people never had any real-life experience with those things. Why are gaps between jobs a red flag? Is the assumption that people aren't supposed to have a life outside of work? Everything Dwight Schrute put on his resume. An old girlfriend was an office manager. She said one day she interviewed a young woman who asked if she had to pass the drug test to get hired. That's a valid question. Someone who occasionally smokes pot on a weekend won't pass most drug tests. But I'd rather work with them than the guy who was drunk by noon every day. Describing accomplishments with we and my team rather than discussing their own contributions and skills. On the opposite end. My favorite resume. For a programming job. Had a chart listing 24 computer languages and tools with a scale of 1 equals I've heard of it to 10 equals I can teach the course. It was unusual at the time and really made the resume stand out. It's no wonder candidates struggle, as I've also heard the inverse to this. Where if the candidate talks about I in the accomplishments, the interviewer assumes they are selfish, take credit for everything and are not a team player. Sounds like applicants can't win either way. I don't think many candidates realize that most companies have some sort of an applicant tracking system, so the new application with a completely different resume will land in the same candidate profile as the older ones. I've seen more candidates that I can count that have a completely different resume depending on the position. Also a LinkedIn profile with different experience than the resume. My personal favorite was the resume that plagiarized the job description that I personally wrote as the responsibility section of their last job on their resume. When I'm not sure if it's legit, I'll take a sentence, copy and paste it into Google, and oftentimes a completely different person's LinkedIn profile will come up in the search results. The different resumes thing doesn't bother me. The best piece of advice I ever got regarding resumes is that it is a marketing document. You use it to sell yourself. Of course you should change it a bit based on the position you are after. Make sure you send the right CV. I've seen an application to a senior position where the guy wrote something like, "I would be the perfect fit for the position at insert company name here, because." Only problem was, the company name was not our. In fact, it was our biggest competitor. Well, not really. We knew he applied there as well, but we didn't expect him to make such a crucial mistake. Close bracket. He didn't get the job. We didn't even invite him. Considering the fact that everything else from his CV matched 100% with the CV he sent into that other company, again. We talked to each other. Doesn't make him seem really intelligent. The only thing he had to get right was changing the company name. I had that happen when I was doing admissions for my university. They clearly wrote one generic essay, which is understandable, and just did a find replace with the university name. However, they misspelled the university name a couple of times in the essay, so the replace function missed it. They didn't get an interview.